Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre. Hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond. Sometimes even from that wacky old beyond. You can find us on YouTube at Terror in Tandem, on Instagram at Terror in Tandem, and you'll always find our latest episode on our website, you guessed it, terrorintandem.com.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And welcome, new listeners.
Welcome.
We just want to say thank you for our dedicated listeners.
Yes.
And thank you to all our new listeners. We really appreciate you. And just to level set and let you know what this is all about.
This is the greatest thing you'll ever hear, and no notes.
I'm Richard. He's Laura. And we love horror.
Does that
and
mean
we
I
like
get to be the nice one?
It.
Because you're nice.
I am. But we are a married couple who like to talk about horror, and we started this podcast as a labor of love, and we write our own ads. So
hope you like. This is, I think, the best way, the way I like to describe it is it's a celebration. I've noticed so many quote unquote fans out there, they're just always finding ways to pick apart this thing they're supposed to love. And we thought, well, we know a lot about this and we love it and we love talking about it. Why not celebrate it and have a good time and lift up things? And
we're not movie critics or book critics or anything like that. It's not
what
about,
even is that anymore?
It's not so much about being a critical eye. It's about highlighting and elevating what we're loving in horror and what we've loved in horror.
Boosting,
and, what
to our millions of
we
followers.
recommend you try to see if you also like and or love.
And to those new listeners, and I do get this question a lot. It's one of the more common ones.
People are stopping him on the streets, people. They're like, I can't, your lines are always tied up.
Yeah. First off, you're gorgeous. Second, I have so many questions. What I do hear from people is sometimes, I don't really watch horror movies, or I'm afraid to watch horror movies. That is exactly, you are our bread and butter. You are in the right place. This is a friendly intro in many ways
or a peanut butter and jelly
to the horror curious. Is this something,
or
because
a cucumber and cream cheese?
Exactly. Well said. And because, the horror genre really never goes away. Like, other genres of film and pop culture have, ebbs and flows, but horror's always around. But we're certainly experiencing a sort of like mainstream renaissance. So if you're just interested in what people are talking about, but maybe you're a bit intimidated to jump right in, that's something we also talk about. Is we'll guide you through your comfort level on. Trust me, there is something out there for every level of comfort.
You don't have to watch horror, read horror, or even engage in the horror that we are talking about or recommending. Maybe you just like us.
Yeah, you could tune in for the sparkling repartee, the witty back and forth, the banter, and
it's all right.
Undisguisable love that we have for both the genre and each other.
Well,
that one of us has for each other.
I'm sorry, I had to cancel an appointment with.
All right. Well, listen.
How do you spell divorce lawyer? Can you
before you do that,
history?
can you please figure out the air filtration system in the cellar? It is really hard to breathe down here.
First of all, it's called a basement.
Absolutely.
As per our agreement.
But thank you, new listeners. We hope you enjoy. And enough of that. Let's get into the spooks.
You lied.
The spookies.
You're a liar.
I am. Or one of us is.
That's what we're going to be talking about today. One of us is lying.
One of us is lying. Sometimes a lot of us are lying. But the point is, somebody's lying here. And we're going to get to the goddamn bottom of it.
And sometimes everyone is lying.
Sometimes everyone's lying.
Or being lied to.
Yeah.
And it's not really a trope.
It's more like an unavoidable part of the human condition.
But in horror specifically, there are several examples
Absolutely.
of where either lies can be to other characters about their true intentions.
Oh, yeah.
Or they could be lying to the audience, as in an unreliable narrator.
Secrets.
The
Hurt
director
someone.
of the film might be lying by having the focal point of the tension be on another
Absolutely.
character.
Yeah, I love
to
that.
distract you from where you should be looking.
Because a good director, a confident director, has control over the eye line of the audience.
Yep.
They know where to get you to look and when to look. It's wonderful. That's why, I think the best way to enjoy films at times is there involves a bit of trust. You have to surrender. You have to let go, allow.
Well, you're trusting the process. That
You're trusting
this
that the
movie is
director,
gonna unfold.
yeah, that they're going
Or a
to
book.
lead you to a satisfying place.
Yeah, especially in books. I mean, the term unreliable narrator comes from literature.
Yes.
And we have several examples. I mean, with our Poe deep dive, we've talked already about
Absolutely.
unreliability of narrator. Or,
And you can catch episodes of that on display at the Smithsonian.
well, one of the things too about storytelling in general is the more that you tell a story, even if it's based on a truth that happened, the more that you talk about it, the storyteller has a tendency to exaggerate the more interesting or exciting parts of a story while leaning away from the more banal or less interesting parts of a story. So then the story over time starts to take on even almost not a lie, but an exaggerated truth.
That's a really good point. A major lie, quote unquote, that I think everybody tells themselves isn't necessarily a purposeful, malicious act. I think our brains are designed to fit things into a discernible narrative, a story. But life doesn't work like a story.
Right.
So sometimes I think our brains fill in the gaps for us, and we don't notice that.
And we skip over details.
Absolutely,
too,
we
when
gloss
we're
over
retelling
things. It's what freaks me out about the criminal justice system, that and everything. But the idea that we spend so much credibility on witness testimony. I mean, just speaking personally, my recountings of things are
From,
not
like,
accurate.
moment to
They're
moment,
buy-ins.
people.
Oh
You
yeah,
can't
no,
even
I
remember.
forget details of things as they're occurring to me. But like, recounting.
Did you forget to turn the record button on?
Oh God, so much gold wasted.
Phone lines are lighting up again.
Yeah.
I think that you lied.
Yeah, I did. And you know what? I would do it again.
But the just to go to your witness testimony piece is a lot of these trials take years and years and years to
Yeah, exactly.
get
They're asking
heard.
you questions like, hey, do you remember this one time from like 35 years ago?
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
know.
what? No.
It's insane. But some of the other ways that we've seen characters wake up from maybe an accident and not have a memory, and then they are relying on everybody else to fill in those blanks.
Yeah. Does that happen in real life where you get bonked on the head in a certain way and you just forget your name and all sorts of
Yes.
shit?
Amnesia
It seems
is
like it
a
happens
real
a
affliction.
lot, though, in movies.
Well, it's a good device
Huh.
of
Yeah, it
tension.
is.
It's
It
a good
is.
tense.
I
and
would
then-
argue it's a trope that has maybe been stretched a bit thin these days.
I disagree.
Like getting into I've been in car accidents. I didn't wake up like conveniently forgetting that I'm a secret super soldier.
Well, that's your universe. This is not the horror universe of which we're talking.
Experiment. Hit me on the head with a hammer enough
Again?
times until I develop Jason Bourne-like abilities.
That's not going to happen.
Bonk.
Again, the unreliable narrator, as we've seen in the book Gone Girl, which had a great
Yikes.
twist,
Very
and the
good.
film
Yeah.
Primal Fear from way back in the day. if
Old
we remember.
Edward Norton as like
Yeah.
a kid,
and
and Richard Gere.
and he convinces everyone
Yeah.
of the lie.
No, that's a good movie.
Kaiser Sose,
From a normal guy that we all like.
well, Tarantino,
No, that was
Usual Suspects, right?
Kaiser Soze was Bryan Singer, another totally unproblematic
Oh, shit.
creator. Yeah. Honestly, you know what? It's part of adulthood. We're going to be talking about directors today that are, in human life, pieces of shit, but we're not going to talk about that. You just have to learn how to separate the art from the artist, and I think make your own rules about that and not judge other people for theirs. Like, if someone decides I can't support this person, then fine. That's okay.
Well, one of the biggest, I would say, pop culture lies in a horror film is Malcolm in Sixth Sense revealing that he is in fact a ghost.
That was a moment. It's a moment why I love movies, because I remember distinctly being in the movie theater at that moment and just having my much younger mind blown out the back of my head.
I mean,
just
that was
totally.
And that was a choice to lie to everybody.
Yeah.
You lied to the audience.
Also, an early introduction to our current queen, Toni Collette. We worship thee.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, M. Night Shyamalan, don't screw this new one up.
Okay, okay. Quick aside. Saw the trailer
His
for Trap,
daughter
right?
is that pop
That's
star.
the question I have. So there is a side of me that really, really likes that. In the trailer, you see a billboard for the film Watchers, which is directed by his daughter Ashana.
Yeah.
And then you learn that all the music for Trap and the Raven character who is putting on the concert is his daughter Salika.
Yeah. I mean, she's got a good voice.
Yeah, but
also, why
it's like,
are you trapping a serial killer called the Butcher with armed police in a venue with lots of teens?
Listen,
and lots of kids.
First off, I don't put poor decision making past any police department. That seems like standard operating procedure. But the other thing is that's just the trailer. I'm sure there are some more Shyamalama ding dongs in there.
Josh Hartnett,
but
love you, mean it.
It was interesting to me that there was so much featured with his daughters. But on the other hand, I also thought that was honestly, that's pretty cool, dude. Having a supportive father.
He's giving them the best chance of success.
Yeah, and having a dad that loves you and supports your career.
What
like
is the point of having a pretty successful at their craft parent if they can't leverage that
I like
success?
how all of a sudden we're having this quote unquote brand new conversation about nepotism when
it's always been there.
Yeah, I'm less concerned with a movie star giving their child a break than like a pharma CEO handing the reins to a multi-billion-dollar company.
You can give them a break, but it doesn't mean that they're gonna, do the great things with it. Then at some point, you just have to be hands off.
I'm looking forward to Watchers.
You know who didn't,
and Trap,
unfortunately, pass before he got to see his daughter's movie is Zelda Williams. And Robin Williams.
Lisa Frankenstein was great.
It was
Zelda
great.
Williams.
We love what you're doing.
Burst
Keep
onto
doing
the
it.
scene. Keep making
just like that. Dark whimsy.
Yes, filling a real void for people like you and I who really enjoy. It's a subgenre I like to call adorable brimstone. Just like it's dark, but it's not harmful. It's sort of grand guignol. Like we're all having a good time here.
I wanted to also bring up Mr. Robot. Because, although I would argue that it was a little horror adjacent for sure.
It depends on what scares you in life. And if that sort of thing scares you, then
technology, things
I found it to be a nerve-wracking show.
Well, it was honestly, mental illness also is scary to some people. But Mr. Robot's main character of Elliot had a personality disorder where he suffered from multiple personality disorder, and he created a persona to replace his father, a persona to replace his mother, to be in line with this narrative that the mastermind, who ended up being the orchestrator of all of the anonymous and the destruction of all of the corporate entities, and also the control over the core Elliot, who started as just a boy. And the mastermind created these personalities to deal with all the rage and anger at the world. And it's not until like the final season where we really see that this has been all constructed. Yeah,
I mean, that's one element of one of us is lying, is the person lying to you could be
lying to themselves.
The showmaker, like the filmmaker, the director could be deliberately lying to the audience. The person
might not be aware that they're lying.
Yeah.
That they are actually being lied to by themselves, or a facet of themselves, or something repressed.
I like that show up until that sort of weird diversion they took when one of his personalities thought he was Freddie Mercury. And that was
You're lying now.
took a long time to get through that arc.
Do you remember any of your first lies in horror that you were surprised by?
Definitely the earliest for me. It's not so much horror because I grew up in a household that, my earliest horror forays I had to do in a clandestine manner, let's just say. But I was allowed to watch like thrillers sometimes. So my introduction was stuff like Alfred Hitchcock, where you would often have a character who is deliberately holding something back, obfuscating, telling an outright lie. Like, The Man Who Knew Too Much is the opposite of that. It's somebody who discovers a lie, and that becomes the problem. Strangers on a Train is predicated on not a lie, but like a social interaction taken very, very literally in the most terrible way possible. So these elements of like manipulation, Shadow of a Doubt is a great example. Lifeboat is where they're literally trapped on a fucking raft in the middle of the ocean with a Nazi.
Right.
So just that idea that just because someone's on camera telling you how it is, that doesn't necessarily mean that's really what's going on. I think those were my earlier forays into that, like Vertigo, where Jimmy Stewart is playing a real manipulative kind of scumbag, and he's gaslighting. He's like really creepily gaslighting the crap out of Kim Novak to the point of like making her wear wigs to look like his dead girlfriend.
Yeah.
So those were definitely, yeah. And then stuff like The Twilight Zone, where it was so often predicated upon getting you to think a certain way and then pulling the rug out from under you. And honestly, I was really interested in Greek mythology when I was a little kid, and that's kind of continued. But I remember reading Greek myths, and there's a lot of duplicity in those.
Yeah.
Lots of lies and, fucking with people. So, and some of those are pretty horrific. They got monsters.
One of my first forays into like pretty big liar deception is A Good Man Is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor.
Oh, geez. Now I feel like, that's a very, very good answer.
It's really about people's appearances can be deceiving and they hide their true selves from others. The grandmother specifically appears to be a good Christian woman, but when she encounters the misfit, her true colors really come. And she also makes up the fact that she wants to go to Tennessee to visit family, but they end up going to Florida, and she's like, but that's the path of the misfit, but she doesn't really know.
Yeah.
Then they encounter the misfit.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
the misfit and the people with him.
Insert edit point here to make Richard look smarter than previous example would suggest.
No, just, reread that short story. But
I should. It's been a while.
I think I read that in high school.
Short stories are a wonderful way.
We've talked about this on the pod before.
There's so many great examples of narrators that are straight up bullshitting you, or in another way, lying to themselves, and you're just a witness to that.
I do like an unreliable narrator.
Absolutely, me too. It really spices things
feet.
up. And as another aside, you and I just got through the absolutely superlative True Detective Night Country, which, man.
Oh, it was... We sad that there were only 6 episodes, but perfect at 6 episodes.
No notes. All of them directed by Issa Lopez, who I've talked about before, especially her film Tigers Are Not Afraid. She is a genius. Watch everything she does, just a master.
As frustrated as you get with Jodie Foster's character, trust me, it definitely puts a real wound in your heart.
Well, and Jodie Foster in a long career of being the absolute greatest, this might be one of her best performances. I just was utterly mesmerized by her. And Kali Reese,
She did great.
was really good.
She held her own.
Cannot
against
wait
Jodie
to
Foster
see.
and the content.
Cannot wait to see her do more. I
Yeah.
think she more than proved her detractors in her performance, which honestly she shouldn't have had to do in the first place. But good on you, Callie Reese, for blowing it out of the park with this one. But it was a really good example of the filmmaker themselves being kind of a liar, in that they led you to places that made you think a certain way and then forced you to reevaluate that way of thinking when they were the ones that made you think that way in the first place. It was so
what I
good.
think is most interesting, honestly, is any good detective novel or detective work is really laid out the way that we saw the show laid out.
It was an example
You
of
follow the clues,
perfectly
you ask
paced
questions.
Yeah.
You know which ones to ask and not to ask.
Yeah, it was like methodical detective work,
Yeah.
but very, very scary intense.
Very scary.
Anyway, sorry about the aside.
Well, let's jump into our one of us is lying examples and highlights we wanted to discuss.
Real quick before we do that,
Oh.
I mean, the reason we're talking about this in the first place, other than the
He's a
fact
big
that
liar,
it's
everyone.
such a, I did lie when I said I was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Why it's such a pervasive trope in horror is not only its ubiquity and its timelessness. I mean, everybody lies. We all do. We lie to ourselves more than anyone. But everyone tells white lies, fibs.
But sometimes you even say, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Like faux confidence helps
we've-
you build confidence.
We've even put, I would say social media is a big driver of this, is now we're rewarding liars for lying to us.
Yeah.
So the reason it comes up so often in horror is because it is so damaging. Lying and manipulating somebody is something that it can take many shapes. It can be done in the heat of the moment. It can be a fear-based reaction of like, I just don't want to get in trouble or I don't want to get caught. Or it can be something more sinister that is like, has a predetermined outcome.
Or the worst of all, you might not even realize you're doing it.
Honestly, I agree. In personal experience in dealing with less than honest folks, someone who's lying has become pathological and compulsive to the point that they can themselves no longer fully draw a distinction between lies and reality. And that is such a wonderful narrative device to use when you're trying to keep your audience off balance. Why not take away the security that you get by trusting someone? So the best examples, I think, invite the audience to drop their guard a bit and trust and then reveal the lies. Because I think in real life, that's the one that sticks with us the most and hurts the most. But the reason we keep coming back to it is, well, gosh darn it, we keep doing it to each other. And I think we keep seeing examples both in real life and in fiction of not just how damaging that is to the principal actors, but the ripple effects.
Well, especially in somebody like The Talented Mr. Ripley or
Ooh, good stuff.
The Great Gatsby.
Mm.
I mean, those lies are very different.
They are,
They're
but
the same lies.
but they're sort of gilded. Yeah.
Same lies, but different intention.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yes.
One is just, I want to be included in the world, and the other is, I should be included in this world.
Yeah,
I deserve to be included in this world.
I think one thing I really admire about the up and coming generations is there seems to be less emphasis on what my parents used to call keeping up with the Joneses, which is just how marketing executives get you to spend money on shit you don't need. But it's needless tension and conflict with your neighbors over stuff.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything dumber than that.
We'll never really disabuse ourselves of that.
No, but I think we have come a long way, baby.
Well, let's jump into it. Why don't you share one of your
I would love to. And this time I'm not lying.
Liars.
Unless I am. So my beloved co-host watched a few of these with me.
I did.
And we had a great time. And that's no lie. So the first one I'm going to discuss.
I didn't have that great of a time.
I had a good time. The first one I'm going to discuss is it's not too long ago. It's from 2016, and it is an early effort from now blowing up director Dan Trachtenberg. I'm talking 10 Cloverfield Lane, which came out in 2016. Now, just a little asterisk here. The whole Cloverfield thing, I don't really get it. Now, there was Cloverfield. Would you like to tell that story?
From how I remember it,
Yeah.
it was a wonderful date night.
Early on in our
knowing.
We were just dating.
At Crossgates Mall.
Name drop.
And I was not informed that this was a shaky camera movie. And
I did
anyone
not
that
know,
knows me
which
knows
I didn't.
I have extreme motion sickness.
This was the getting to know you part of our relationship.
Why would it come up? I'm extremely motion sick.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You'd be surprised how that's organically, if it's very difficult to just bring up out of the blue.
So within the first half hour of the film,
you made it all the way to the scene where they're underground and the girl that got infected starts like vomiting blood everywhere.
Within the first half hour, I was feeling very nauseous.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to look at the film.
Yeah.
I had to look at the floor for much of it.
And of course, oblivious dipshit sitting next to you is just like completely
And
enraptured
I'm
by
just
the movie.
trying to get through this date. And then I said, I need to excuse myself. I'm feeling sick. And a kind gentleman that I was on the date with, Richard, that's sitting across from me now, got up and left while I was throwing up in a garbage can near the exit of the Crossgates Mall.
Still one of the better first dates I've ever had, honestly.
So he didn't make me go back in.
No.
And he was very bummed about it because he
was
really, really wanted to see the movie.
Yeah, but I was inside bummed about it. Like I wasn't out there like, come on. And I did end up seeing the movie like years and years and years later. I just on streaming.
Yeah.
I watched the end of it.
It wasn't worth it, was it?
I was like, fine.
So back to 10 Cloverfield.
Well, the whole
Lane.
Cloverfield thing is, ever since that movie, there hasn't really been like much of a connection between the two spiritual follow-ups, 10 Cloverfield Lane and the Cloverfield Paradox. They both began life as a script that had nothing to do with anything Cloverfield. In 10 Cloverfield Lane's case, I think it was written before Cloverfield ever came out. It was originally called The Cellar, and then J.J. Abrams bought it up and was like, slap the name on it, and brr. So anyway, the movie stars John Goodman in maybe his greatest villain turn since like he freaked out at the end of Barton Fink. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who was in the, Scott Pilgrim and the 2011 version of The Thing, and John Gallagher Jr., who's primarily a stage actor, a lot of Broadway. Very, very talented dude. But it's really just the three of them. It's a single location movie. Now, what happens is it starts off, we see Mary Elizabeth Winstead breaking up with her fiance and moving out, and she's driving, and she gets into a terrible accident, wakes up, in a weird bunker.
Her leg is
chained to the wall. Yeah. Just the way
broken leg, though.
Any woman wants to wake up. So John Goodman comes in, and this is now I want to point this out, not in like I'm not trying to like overanalyze his physique, but over the last few years, John Goodman has lost a considerable amount of weight. He's like kind of skinny now. He was not that way. So he is large and hulking in this movie.
It works really well because of the heavy breathing, too.
He really plays to that because the movie takes place in an underground bunker, which means small spaces, narrow hallways, confined things. So this hulking, heavy breathing mass of a man, and the way John Goodman plays his character is slow to speak, but his bursts of anger are like 0 to 1,000, in an instant. And he's very scary, and he breathes heavily, in that sort of wheezing through his nose way. So he really exudes male menace. And a lot of the way he menaces specifically Mary Elizabeth Winstead, is not. He does yell and raise his voice and use violence, but I found him to be much scarier when he's basically just standing in the room, like breathing heavily and like near her. It's very
well. She's got pretty much a hair trigger when it comes to male intentions.
It becomes a little. So that's the brilliance of this movie. Now, she wakes up, she's in this bunker. There's also John Gallagher Jr., who plays this sort of lovable kind of, fuck up, who's in there with them. And John Goodman says, I'm keeping you safe because everything outside has gone to shit. There's been some sort of attack and the air is toxic. You can't leave. We're in my bunker that I made. So
there's no TV.
Yeah, there's no radio. There's no way to
cell
confirm
service.
this. The only thing she has to go on is the word of this very strange, violent man who kidnapped her and chained her to a wall. So as things unfold, I want to be very clear. This movie, it's not like Lost. It does answer the questions. It does tell you what's going on.
And a lot of people lie in this film.
Yes.
And a lot of the same people actually are telling the truth.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because one of the, I think what separates this movie from others we might discuss is the real power and the real catalyst, the turning point of this movie is not so much that they're lying. It's that when you have been led to believe that they're lying, and honestly, all the evidence is pointing to them lying, and then, holy shit, it turns out they were telling the truth about this one part. Maybe not everything.
Right.
But this one very crucial part, they were, in fact,
and why she's
not
down
lying.
there also.
Yeah. So it's
a
really...
pattern.
It's even worse that way because it does not allow the audience to put things in a bucket. You can't say, okay, well, this is the lying part and that's the fake part. He's a liar, so avoid him completely. Because no one in this movie is fully lying and no one in this movie is fully honest. All of them are telling just enough truth that you really need to pay attention to it in order to live, but it's hard to suss out from all the bullshit they're spewing to each other. It's all fear-based, survival, but I really enjoyed this movie. The twists, I think, are a little overblown. You can see them coming.
Yeah,
but
and the last part, chunk of the movie is a little off the rails for me. But
it does get a little strange, which I personally really liked. My co-pilot through this strange journey called podcasting didn't like it as much as me. But
just not that back half.
10 Cloverfield, honestly, by back half, you really mean like the last 6 minutes of the movie.
That's what I mean. The back half of the back half. But
it's a good burn.
One thing I do want to say is you, as the audience member, also question what the truth is until you know it.
It does a very good job of not painting John Goodman as being like obviously full of shit. You question him, but there's enough of you going, well, what if he's right?
Yeah. And maybe it's her trust issues.
And that is his great power, aside from his, physical bulk in the movie.
Because he's likable.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Sully.
But he's so cranky and such an asshole.
He's Sully, though.
I think it's more that you like, first off,
Sully from Monster
Inc.
Inc.
Even Mary Elizabeth Winstead says this in the movie where she's like, of all the fucking people to save you at this point, it's this guy.
Yeah.
So
he's not, and he didn't save her. And that was another lie.
You find out more things about. Don't feel too bad. He's not a nice man. But I really enjoyed 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's a paranoid, single location, high concept, low budget success story. It launched the career of Dan Trachtenberg, who went on to do Prey and is now developing Into the Badlands or The Badlands, I think it's called, something like that, which is another period set Predator movie, but it's not a sequel to Prey. So fuck, man, I'm for it. I love watching Predators go up against like flintlock muskets. Nice. So yeah, 2016, 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's a really entertaining ride, and you don't need to know dick about Cloverfield to watch it because it does not connect.
Awesome.
So,
well, you want me to jump into mine and then we'll take a break?
I would love both of those things.
So mine's a little cheaty. I'm cheating a little bit.
You're lying about it?
No, just cheating.
That's a form of lying.
So my first is the Scream movies, but in particular, Scream 1 and Scream 5.
Okay. Two of the better installments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And two of the better lies. So Scream 1 is 1996. It takes place, and we get to know fictional Woodsboro in Northern California, where we meet Sidney Prescott. She lives with her father. And this film is all about tipping the hat to slashers.
Absolutely. And
Wes
then
Craven's intention
subverting
was
all
really
of those
to
tropes.
tip his hat. And the now classic opening scene with Drew Barrymore's Casey Becker playing the phone game of Ghostface.
And also the idea of casting a major A-list famous actor to kill them within like the first 5 minutes of your movie.
Yes.
That's not something a lot of people do.
So Sydney is just living her life in this town after the pretty tragic rape and murder of her mother, who the perpetrator is alleged perpetrator, but convicted perpetrator is now in jail, Cotton Weary. That's one thing I will say. These all are great names.
Yeah, I mean, that just sounds like someone who is like really tired from a long day in the field.
Yeah.
I'm Cotton Weary.
So she's trying to navigate her relationship with Billy Loomis, who sort of got that Johnny Depp vibe, played by
Skeet Ulrich.
Skeet Ulrich.
Yeah, it's because I think he like stole his DNA.
All he wants to do is have sex with her. And then we have Gail Weathers. Again, the name. It's like the perfect news weather girl. You know, it's like a weather news commentator.
I mean, to be fair, when we lived in Los Angeles, our weatherman's name was Dallas Raines.
Yeah.
He did
but
the weird
Dorothy
fist thing.
Gail Weathers,
Oh,
you know.
I know.
Small town, that kind of thing.
So Kevin Williamson is
Played by Courtney
You can
Cox.
accuse him of a lot of things, and subtlety isn't one of them.
Yeah. Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox. Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. And they have bad blood because Gail wrote a book about Sidney's mom, Maureen's murder, and saying that Cotton Weary was framed. So she's alleged that Cotton Weary was sent to jail and framed because of it. So
She's also
cut to
correct.
Ghostface is in town, chases Sidney around, all her friends, goes to a party at Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. Well,
Kills
Stu
Jamie
Macher's
Kennedy.
house, played by
Matt Lillard. Yeah.
Yep. And they end up being revealed as the killers.
We're in the midst of a
killers.
Lillardessence.
Yeah, they get, and the reason why these two are killers is because Maureen had an affair with Mr. Loomis, causing them to break up, and Stu just did whatever. He was total psychopath.
Yeah, like throw killers.
Just wanted to do anything to be cool. And so basically Randy, Gail, and Sydney are the only people to survive. And Dewey.
Don't forget about Deputy Dewey.
Yeah, but of the group that I just talked about.
And also, there's a time limit to his survival.
And so, the two killers, this is a great twist. They aren't slick or calculating or well thought out. They're not superhuman. They're just two hyper masculine, angry men who want to take out vengeance on the person.
Their personas, though,
ruin their life.
Are the tropes of, in any other slasher movie, people that would either be victims or survivors.
Exactly.
Matt Lillard plays the goofy class clown type who's like the life of the party, and Skeet Ulrich is the brooding cool guy boyfriend.
You don't really suspect them
No.
until
Why would
they
you?
reveal themselves.
In every other slasher movie, they are not the killer. That was so brilliant about it, was making them the killers. I'd never seen anything
The other
like
brilliant part is that it's Randy, who is very into all the tropes of horror. Like, he would be a great guest.
Yeah, when
for
we saw
us.
this in the theater in high school, all of my friends called me Randy.
Yeah. Well, that does
I know.
fit. Anyway, Randy is like, I think it could be the boyfriend. It's always the boyfriend.
Yeah.
But everybody, begged him
Randy
off
gives
as
a
being,
lot of good advice in the movie.
does.
Again, bringing us back to a commentary.
and also
theme.
in the
Listen.
second movie, you
Listen
should
to people.
listen to Randy because
Listen
he was
to-
right there too.
Listen to the creepy guy at the gas station who's
Yeah.
old and warning you, and also listen to your weird friend who watches way too much horror movies. They are always right.
So now cut to 20 years after the happenings in the original Scream, we meet Tara, a Woodsboro student who is attacked by someone wearing a ghost face mask. And unlike the opening Casey Becker of the original, she survives this attack, which was a surprise and really great. And it leads to her estranged older sister Sam coming home, and she brings her boyfriend Richie, who's not happy about being in this crazy town, and she reunites with her sister and her sister's group of friends who seemingly all have connections to the original Scream characters. So sprinkle in a couple others like Tara's friend Amber.
Like, it's a good entry point, but it does reward longtime viewers.
Yeah. And Liv as the girlfriend of one of the nephews of Randy. So Ghostface decides to kill some people, trying to kill Sam, who reveals herself to be Billy Loomis's daughter. So Billy Loomis knocked up Sam's mother and had Sam, and she sees him, the ghost of Billy, and kind of has a little bit of killer instinct in her. And that's what Scream does so well, is it lies to you and the characters lie to each other until the truth is found out.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. You want to take a little break?
Yeah.
Great.
Let's do it.
Tired of watching mom blow through your inheritance on medicine? Or have you just had it up to here with caring for the vulnerable with compassion? Well, whatever the reason, you don't need the millstone around your neck that is loved ones. But you know what else you don't need? A first-degree murder charge. And that's where Visiting Demons comes in. At Visiting Demons, our swarm of infernally trained hospice monsters will make sure the ailing breadwinner in your family meets an untimely but difficult to investigate end. Oopsie! Forgot to check the chart before we gave Gam Gam her medication. Ruh-roh. Looks like Uncle Moneybags fell out of the bed and out of the locked window across the room. You'll be laughing all the way to the reading of the will, secure in the knowledge that none of this will be traced back to you, because all visiting demons return to the specific plane of hell from which they were summoned upon a job well done. Sure, it causes them torment the human mind can't comprehend, but I think we've already established you don't care about things like that, am I right? Visiting demons. Because who has time to wait for natural causes when you've got student loans to pay off? This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse hiring demons to murder people for money. Just let time take care of it. And we're back. Or are we?
What's your next one?
Is it? Or am I? Who? It's so confusing. So many lies. I've ran...
And we're back.
Are we? So my next one is... It's a classic. It is from 1968, and it's directed by a man that you've all heard of. And listen, we know what he did. He's a piece of shit. I'm talking about the movie. It's directed by Roman Polanski, and of course I'm talking about Rosemary's Baby, starring an absolutely incredible cast of Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, Charles Grodin, Ruth Gordon, Ralph Bellamy. Oh my God. If you are like me, a million years old, you know all those people. So John Cassavetes is who I'm going to be focusing on, although a lot of people lie to Rosemary. Old John really takes the cake here. So for the one or two people that don't know what this is, Rosemary is played by Mia Farrow, a very young, like wayfish, tiny little pixie Mia Farrow. She's like a kid in this movie. She plays Rosemary, who becomes with
They're
child.
like newlyweds.
Yeah. Newlywed to
Move
John
a
Cassavetes.
new apartment that's like a promise of all of these great neighbors.
Yeah. And they're finally going to live the good life. And John Cassavetes is a struggling actor who, oh, good, just got the role of a lifetime when the previous actor suddenly went down blind. Anyway, essentially, John Cassavetes gives the okay for the cult next door to have his wife raped by Satan.
That's the cost of the apartment. That's the HOA fee.
Yeah. Is $25 a month and Satan raping your spouse.
It's HELL fee.
Now, she ends up becoming pregnant with the Antichrist and has her baby. And what's wrong with his eyes? Now, the thing is, everyone lies to poor Rosemary in this movie. She is gaslit into fucking oblivion by
psychosis, like
the castanets,
total breakdown.
Her cool neighbors that give her weird teas and send her to Dr. Charles Grodin, who totally lies to her, take her away from her actual doctor. Her husband, who lies to her constantly and then says, yeah, hey, the devil, go jam my wife so I can have a career. And then pretends to feel like really bad about it. But
yeah, it's the ultimate deal with the devil.
Yeah, he doesn't feel that badly about it.
No, he does
so
not.
The thing about poor Rosemary is she never had a chance. No, she never had a chance. She tries her best. She fights back. She pushes. And she comes to a very difficult and very moving conclusion at the end of the movie, which is not one you might expect, but sometimes you just play the cards that were dealt, and those cards were dealt to you by a cult of Satan worshippers who manipulated every act of your life so you could give birth to the son of Satan.
And you have to understand that from the opening scene of the view onto this New York City apartment building that's so high up and vast, she's all alone in the world.
Yes.
She
spends all her time alone. No one believes her. Her friends start to abandon her. These new people that she's introduced, she has nothing in common with them. She doesn't even really like them, but they are constantly around her, especially Ruth Gordon. It is a very isolating, scary place for a woman, especially in 1968, to be, even though Mia Farrow is very pretty.
Now, what was happening to women in 1968 that could have been difficult?
Nothing that isn't happening right now, honestly. So,
especially when it comes to birth.
Now, this movie I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's so talked about. It is legit. It's phenomenal. It's based on the Ira Levin novel, which was published in 1967. It's a very good book, and the adaptation is very faithful. Ira Levin later wrote a sequel, which is not made into a movie, which is pretty good, too. It's like grown-up Damien, or no, not Damien, grown-up Rosemary's Baby, I don't remember his name, and his, destiny as the Antichrist. So a couple of trivia things about this movie. Alfred Hitchcock was originally offered to direct, and he turned it down.
Yeah.
He was like, this isn't really
that on the
for me.
In the past.
It's that I find fascinating. Now, the husband role, which eventually went to John Cassavetes when Polanski insisted on it, was originally offered to Robert Redford and Jack Nicholson. Both said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, poor Mia Farrow almost quit halfway through, not because of anything future super creep Roman Polanski did, but because wonderful ladies' man and then husband Frank Sinatra so disapproved of her getting a job because he's the man. So he served her divorce papers in the middle of filming, and she was very upset and wanted to leave. And the producers showed her the footage they had shot so far and said, this is going to be a defining moment in your career.
That happened to Olivia
you need to
Wilde.
Stick with it. Yeah.
Right in the middle of
her. Oh, yeah. Men always
finishing
be the press tour for and then that's all anyone fucking talks about instead of the actual work this woman spent years doing.
Crazy relationship with Florence Pugh, apparently.
But I heard Ted Lasso's a really nice guy. So old Blue Eyes served her papers and she it was really tough on her. But they showed her what they had done so far, and she was like, okay, yeah, all right, I believe you. And it's a classic for 60 years and was a defining moment of her career.
And it also probably shined a light on her husband that needed to be shown, and it was earlier than she had expected, and maybe her meek wayfish ways
Yeah.
were emboldened to see better things for
Hey,
herself.
at least we got Ronan Farrow out of that deal. Allegedly. So, don't worry about Mia Farrow, because she actually, after Frank Sinatra went on to find a really, really wonderful guy that she settled down with, has no controversies at all. And that man's name is, I'm sorry, I'm getting a note from my producer.
You're lying.
Oh.
These are lies.
Oh. He did what?
I'm the producer.
Yeah. So anyway, never mind about that. Mia Farrow's great. The other little bit of trivia is, so John Cassavetes was also a very, very well-respected and famous auteur film director. And his son, Nick Cassavetes, directed The Notebook, amongst other things. And also, I don't know him so much from The Notebook. I remember him as the guy from Face Off who was in the party with Nicolas Cage when he was secretly John Travolta, who gave him a bunch of drugs and then listened to him talk about how he was going to rip off the other guy's face.
See, Nepo babies don't always get the best roles.
It's just, and then he became like a much more well-known director, but I remember he was that dude in Face Off. So Rosemary's Baby is one of the greatest examples of manipulation.
Everyone is lying to you.
Yeah. And just the absolute isolation, even in the middle of the city, married to a successful guy and in a big apartment, in a life that anyone on the outside would look at and go, your life is fucking perfect. How terrifying it is for her, and how at the end she does make a decision, but is it really a decision when you don't have a choice?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's survival.
So that is Rosemary's Baby. I cannot recommend it enough. It is a slow burn, terrifying masterpiece with,
One
again,
of my favorite films.
like all great slow burns, has an ending that you will never, ever, ever forget.
Yeah. My next is What Lies Beneath, a thriller / horror adjacent from 2000. I hold this film very close to me because I think it's underrated. It's completely underrated.
This is a rare moment.
People like The Fugitive, then it's got the same type of like nail biting.
This is a rare moment where it's usually me defending a horror movie I like to you going, this isn't good. But quite the opposite. I saw What Lies Beneath in the theater, and I never want to see it again.
Well, listen, it's directed by non-horror director Robert Zemeckis.
It is.
So it's thriller.
Well, I mean,
adjacent.
The Polar Express was kind of horrific.
And the story revolves around Claire and Norman Spencer, played by Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford. They recently are empty nesters. Claire becomes very suspicious of her neighbors and really reads into a seemingly tumultuous relationship between her neighbors. And she starts to become unraveled, drinking a lot, doing a Ouija board.
And you come undone.
She starts to see things happening around her house, like paranormal happenings, things being written in the fog or the steam from the shower.
Always like that one. When you come out of the shower and there's some fucked up shit drawn in
Yeah.
the steam, and that's terrifying.
And she is constantly trying to get somebody to listen to her neighbor, her husband. Nobody ever listens. And then the ghost or the paranormal activity persists and keeps knocking over this one particular photo of Norman.
For sure.
He's a scientist. He's pretty successful.
He's Harrison Ford.
She opens the frame and sees a newspaper article about a missing woman named Madison Elizabeth Frank, which are the same initials that the ghost has been writing and the Ouija board spelled out. She thought it was her neighbor Mary, but it wasn't. So, and according to what Norman is now telling Claire once she confronts him, is that Claire walked in on Norman and Madison having an affair. Norman later attempted suicide, and all of that basically made Claire go into a trauma response where she blocked this all out. But Claire keeps digging. She finds jewelry and photos of Madison, and she starts to remember that Madison is the one who allegedly committed suicide in their house, and Norman hid the body to protect his career. And when she confronts him with this, Norman pretends to call 911. She dials the number. It's 411. Then he comes up behind her and injects her with a paralytic drug and drags her into a bathtub that's being filled up.
Yeah.
So I won't ruin the final 20 minutes, but it's a nail biter. It's good. Lots of escape and chasing happens. You find Madison's body at some point. So Norman, big liar, lying to his wife, lying to everybody in the scientific community.
He's the opposite of Richard Kimball.
And also Claire, she's lying to herself because she can't remember. So she's creating these things like the neighbors being... She thinks her neighbor actually killed his wife and drags her body out and then is confronted by her in public and can't even believe that she got it so wrong. So the Robert Zemeckis and the whole film itself creates Claire to be an unreliable storyteller. Just like a crazy drunk wife who has empty nest syndrome. Anyway, I love it. It's a thriller classic. If you like thriller books and you've never seen this, just give it a try. I think Amber Valletta, the model, she's the Madison character.
Ah, all right. What lies beneath?
Yeah. I love it.
My last one is one that you and I watched together quite recently. I actually don't know exactly how you felt about it. I loved it. And it came out in Australia last year, but it was released very recently this year
really
on Shudder.
It.
Yeah,
I figured it out pretty early on, though.
I know you did. You are... Well, okay, back up. You did figure it out, but let's just say... It's not like you had one theory only that was correct.
Well, there wasn't just one theory.
I know, but
like the main part of who she was,
you did figure it out. Let's just say there was a lot of spaghetti on the wall. So You'll Never Find Me from directors Indiana Bell and Josiah Allen, with a script, I believe, by Bell. Now, this is absolutely my jam of a movie. Again, I didn't do this on purpose, but I suppose this setting really lends to the dangers of a liar. It's a single setting location with two people. That's the movie. It definitely, when you don't have a lot of room to maneuver, when you can't escape, and when you have a limited number of people around you, and say, like, if there's only two people and one of them's a liar, that's 50% of the people in there.
You have to create tension. You have to create movement. So
this film, it takes place in Australia in a camper, in like a trailer.
In a trailer park.
Yeah, it's in a park. Now, you don't really see a lot of other things going on because it starts at 2 a.m. It basically unravels in real time. And it is during a massive storm that cuts out power, cuts out phones, makes it escaping basically impossible. So Patrick, when we meet him, he's looking at this liquid in an ampule and drinking, and it's again after 2, so it's a little weird, just sitting at a table drinking. And there's a loud knock at the door, and a persistent one. And he asks this person to go away in a very polite way. Now, this is a young lady known only as the visitor in the credits, because I'm not sure her name's actually even mentioned in the movie, but it's not really important. She comes in with bare feet out of this torrential storm, and she's asking for a ride. She's asking for, whatever. She seems like a pretty normal person, but her story doesn't really add up. She changes it a couple of times, and you understand why. I mean, it's the middle of the night. She's in a caravan with this very large and strange man who is very quiet. He's very insistent about things, and he goes on long monologues that are really philosophical and nihilistic. So the whole thing kind of felt to me, it reminded me a lot of Jean-Paul Sartre's play No Exit, which is about three people, Joseph Inez and I can't remember the last person's name, but they are all basically sitting around in hell waiting to be processed, but they don't really know they're in hell. And it's just this sort of personal hell of theirs. Now, this movie, it all takes place in the camper for the most part, except for like one or two flashbacks. It really keeps you guessing, I would say, for the majority of the film. Now, the denouement, the last 10 minutes, really go wild. It's a slow burn of a film with a slapdash banger ending. Not slapdash,
they
a
end
whiz
up
bang.
playing also a game of lying.
Yeah, they play bullshit, which is a great device for them to call bullshit on each other, both in the game and in their talkings to each other. At certain points, it shifts focus, I think, from like, oh, Patrick's definitely up to something, to what's up with this visitor person.
Yeah.
And
who do you believe? Whose intentions are
I think you
true?
really start to ask, well, am I being fair to Patrick? Maybe he's just a lonely person, you know? Not every like weird looking dude living alone has a sinister past.
Well, he also talks about the rest of the inhabitants of the trailer park. They're not great people.
No, but
I think it's sort of a life of people who have maybe perpetuated.
They're very clear that they mention, you know,
and stand up.
This is the life of people who are running from something, but not everybody's running from criminality. Sometimes you're just running from pain. And that's sort of the sense that you get from Patrick. And then things switch. You start to question Patrick and sympathize with the visitor. And then it feels like as soon as the filmmakers allow their audience the space to maybe start to formulate a conclusion, they switch things up on you. It is I believe, a debut film, but it feels very confident. Filmmakers who really trust in their vision and know what they're doing, because they do an awful lot of tension building with very little. It's
I also think that the naming of Patrick, as opposed to not naming anybody else, is really lends itself to the final plot.
100%. You for a lot of the movie, it's really best to just experience.
I wouldn't say it's a horror movie as much of a thriller movie.
Disagree.
Well, I mean, you know, horror and thriller are
sure. I think they're close, but
toe-to-toe.
I would call this a straight up horror movie.
I
Specifically,
just mean for
given the
the
ending.
more sensitive to gore and violence.
No, it's
and
not a
blood
terribly
out
gory
there.
movie. It has violence, but it's not like super gory. But it is a horror movie. Make no mistake. It's the real strength of it. The directors manage an incredible amount of tension building through tight camera angles on, you know, like a sweaty face or heavy breathing
And color banding, lighting.
the lighting choices, the lack of light. The sound design is impeccable. The way that the outside creaks and storm sounds of the storm.
Even him getting up from just the chair.
The way he gets up from the chair and everything creaks a certain way because he's quite large. He's tall. He's bulky. And this visitor girl is slight and young and you know, could easily be overpowered by him. Things certainly take a change. I've noticed a theme in our recent watching, and I think it's a theme that's becoming more prevalent in the genre, is we're seeing more manifestations of an unapologetic manifestations of female rage in the genre, of using horror to express the rage often felt by the violence directed towards women, the marginalization, the gaslighting, the lack of agency, and that finally coming to a boiling point, as it does with everybody. And we're seeing that more and more from these female creators. And it's such an authentic take on that. It's not just like a grindhouse 70s movie about some like bikini chick with a machine gun killing her evildoers. This is about trauma and legitimate anger and how that anger can damage people and the holder. You know, it's a wonderful exploration that we're getting. But I really, really enjoyed You'll Never Find Me. It rewards the patient viewer, but I found it absolutely nail biting from start to finish, and with a very satisfying ending.
My last that I'm going to talk about is Shutter Island.
Oh, we saw that together in the movies.
We did. Came out in 2010, directed by Martin Scorsese, written and based on the book by Dennis Lehane, and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Emily Mortimer, and Mark Ruffalo.
And Michelle Williams.
Yeah. It's definitely neo-noir. It's set in 1954. The film is a story about U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his partner Mark Ruffalo, and they go to Ashcliffe Hospital for the Criminally Insane on the remote island of Shutter Island. And they begin investigating the disappearance of a patient, played by Patricia Clarkson, who was sent to Ashcliffe for drowning her children. Now, as the characters start to unravel what happened with Rachel and her children, Teddy is plagued with terrible migraines and hallucinations of his wife, Dolores, played by Michelle Williams.
He also has a couple of interactions, specifically one with legendary Clancy Brown, where you're like, that was an odd conversation.
Yeah. And so she was killed in a fire set by a man named Andrew Ladeus. And Teddy's mental strain becomes worse over the course of the investigation. And it really starts to play into his mental state as he becomes more frantically trying to uncover this, but also being torn apart by these memories and flashbacks of, his wife and this fire that she was in.
I mean, DiCaprio obviously does an amazing job. Playing this like strung out, kind of twitchy detective who's always on the verge.
So as all mentally unwell people do, they go to the lighthouse.
Ah, yes. That is the end destination for all of us with an affliction.
So he goes to the lighthouse and he finds Dr. Cowley, who basically tells us and Teddy,
spoiler alert,
that he is Andrew Ladeus, which is an anagram of Teddy's assumed name, Edward Daniels. And he's an inmate of Ashcliffe. And everybody in the film, up until this point, has been lying to him, creating this charade to help him deal with the withdrawal symptoms of not taking his medication and to prevent him from having a lobotomy. So they're trying this radical method of, exposure therapy, but giving it's sort of what you do with somebody who has Alzheimer's. You
this
play
is
along with the.
Well, speaking of lobotomies, historically speaking, this is around the same time period that Joe Kennedy, wonderful dad extraordinaire, famously had his mentally unwell daughter lobotomized. It was botched, leaving her with severe brain damage, and then he just locked her away in an asylum for years. And then Senator Jack Kennedy found her and visited her and started a series of mental health and institutional reforms.
Right? Was it Rose?
No, Rose is the mother. Madeline, I think, was her name. And that was then undone during the Reagan administration.
But this is pretty like an extreme method of trying to confront Andrew with the reality of what he's done. And when he is finally willing to accept the truth, he said that he will he'll have no choice because he keeps going back to the U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels persona to cope, because he can't cope with what a monster he is.
You were right. It was Rosemary Kennedy.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, he's trying so hard, and they're like, no, we're going to lobotomize him. Then we don't know what happens. We don't know, Martin Scorsese leaves this open to interpretation. We don't actually know if he was lobotomized. And regardless of whether it's happened or not, he is taken away. And he basically says to live as a monster or to die as a good man. Like, basically, he'd rather continue living as himself, but someone who committed a crime by murdering his wife or be lobotomized as a delusional Teddy. You know, that's the big question. He doesn't think of himself as the person who killed his wife. And she killed
It's really sad.
The
there's
thing
a
is,
moment...
Michelle Williams drowned the kids. So it's almost justifiable, but not really.
Well, that's what caused his break.
Yes.
And there's a moment at the end where you're like, oh, maybe this worked. And then you realize...
maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. So your question...
But you realize that this is far from the first time this play has acted out.
And Teddy is not the only player.
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't just start this radical therapy with Leonardo DiCaprio's character.
It's one of Scorsese's very few, horror movies, the other being Cape Fear, and it kind of has a similar theme of an exploration of violent men.
Yes, and
there is a point where Clancy
everybody's
Brown,
lying.
I think, says to him, "We're both men of violence,
Yeah.
you and I." And exploring people whose background is violence, whether that is their own inclination or because they were a soldier and they were told to commit violence, but just
Right.
how that affects not
doing-
only them, but the people around them.
What they're doing in effort of a therapeutic process is not unlike, destroying someone's life.
Yeah, it's like David Fincher's The Game,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
I love that movie.
That's a great movie.
But it also forces the characters and the audience to really wonder what is real and what's imagined. Because we're also being told this tale by a bunch of liars. And, we don't know. It's very complex.
So,
mental health is very complex.
I have no evidence for this, and it is a lie, but I heard that Martin Scorsese was originally approached to direct The Truman Show, and this was his pitch, and they were like, that's not really what we were going for.
Really?
I just
that's
said
a
it was a lie.
Oh.
Or was I lying when I said it was a lie?
I don't know.
You'll never know.
But then it also raises questions about what being insane really is, what it looks like, who really is insane.
Who makes that determination?
Correct. And it's complex and nuanced, and the way that he is treated is very barbaric. Although he's not physically held down and electrocuted over and over again, we don't know that because we're only getting this story told to us
By an unreliable narrator. Good example.
Thank you.
Don't go to Shutter Island, folks. There are other islands to visit.
I thought we I thought we were possibly going to bring up Speak No Evil, but I guess we're going to wait on that.
I thought that might either be a remake or a Danish episode.
Yeah, but it is a good example of
Lying.
One of us
Yes,
lying.
the what was it, 2021 maybe? The Danish movie Speak No Evil, which is now coming out with a remake later this year with James McAvoy and Mackenzie Davis. But the original is a very good example of fucking lying to people.
Yeah. But yeah, check any of those out or none of them. I don't care. You could tell me you did. I'll never know.
Yeah.
But we hope
Lie to everyone but us.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode about one of us is lying. And now just write in or light up our calls to tell us who you think is lying, me or Richard.
I hope you all have a really great week, honestly.
And I know you all have a great week.
Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Sispanik. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're standing right behind you.